Welcome back to the Vantage Point, where we cultivate your mind for the jewels of the soul. I'm your lady and host, Sister Azandi Malinki, and you're tuned into your scripturally conscious and culturally awakened podcast. I want to thank you all for joining us another week. I can never say thank you enough to our viewers, and I'm going to continue to ask you every week. You know what's coming. Help us, help us, help us increase our subscribers. Please share, like, comment. I need to see some comments. I need to know if you're enjoying this, if you're learning anything, if I need the tea, please help me out. And definitely share it so we can get our subscribers up as we try to spread this message of awareness and consciousness, spiritual awareness, right? So today's episode, as you all know, is what's today's episode? Today's episode is overcoming intrusive thoughts. So we have a guest with us today. He hasn't been on in a while, but he has been with us before. And we want to introduce in just a moment our guest, Kahun Uncle Sarah, also known as Cleveland Dr. Eneas III. Now, we've done a previous video which came out a bit late due to some editing times. But in that video, I hope if you haven't seen it, you go back and watch it. It kind of gives us a little bit of a headway on today's topic. We talk about the mind, we talk about the brain, right? We talk about how the brain processes thoughts. It's not completely in depth, but it just gets us started on understanding how those thoughts are processed. We talked about the hormones. We talked about what influences thought, right? What influences these different thoughts. But we did the surface level because we need our guests today to take us deep. We're going to go deep diving. So we want to introduce our guest again, Kahun Uncle Sarah. And I have to fix the flyer. Dr. Cleveland Eneas III. Put some respect on his name, okay? We're going to add the doctor on there. How are you today?
Yes, indeed. Namastu, my sister. I'm well. It's been an eventful day, but I'm happy to be here. The clouds are, giving us some cool weather, so I'm outside today. Now we're gonna have ourselves a good conversation.
Yes, we are. I need a plane ticket to come to the Bahamas. I get jealous every time y'all come on screen with these nice backgrounds, the palm trees, and all this stuff going on. I'm hearing this cold, semi-cold weather. It's getting cold. It's not cold yet. I won't complain, but it's not the Bahamas.
Yes,
Oh
indeed.
man.
We have hot weather. We happy for a little bit of cool right now. So
Yes.
we'll send some of the heat your way.
Yes, please. Well,
Yeah.
my teacher said once, the being you are trying to awaken, the being you are trying to awaken and become is opposite of the world in which you live. And if the world in which we live is opposite from this being we're trying to awaken, then that means that this world is introducing some things that's kind of countering what we need to reach this state of awakening. And so I wanted to just have a conversation with you today. I'm not drilling you. I just want to have a genuine conversation because so many of us in today's society, so many of us deal with intruding thoughts, right? Intrusive thoughts. And these intrusive thoughts, it says that the etymology of the word intrusive is usurping, is assert falsely. Um, Unbidden means not asked for. So it's unwanted thoughts. And nobody invited these thoughts. I don't know if you ever heard the song, How Did You Get Here? Yeah, nobody invited these thoughts.
Right.
And
Right.
so we're trying to figure out what's going on. Now, when I say a lot of us battle, and it's a serious thing, right? I'm making light of, but it's a serious thing because we're trying to figure out why can't I come to this level of reasoning? Like, it's one part of me that says it's not that deep, let it go. It's another part of me that says slap her or slap him. It's another part of me that says, right? It's another part of me that says he's cheating. It's another part of me say you're bugging, you tripping. It's not that deep. It's not that serious. So, have you ever experienced any of these intrusive thoughts? And if so, please share with us what that looked like for you.
Well, first of all, thanks again for inviting me here. I'm happy to be here. Intrusive thoughts. I think the first thing um, on this journey, this journey of awakening, one of the things that I've been taught by our teacher, the Rev. Dr. A.J. Vama, is that we have to label each part of ourselves, right? We have to know thyself, understand who
Okay.
you are, what you are. Um, you have your personality, but then you got your parents, your grandparents on both sides, your great grandparents on both sides, etc. Going back, four generations at least. And so
Mhm.
one of the handicaps we have as a people is that we don't necessarily know who these people were in terms of what their personalities were like, what types of food they ate, what types of clothes they wore, etc. etc. We just didn't know them as people. You many of us don't even know the names of these ancestors of ours. So they're in us. They are communicating with us, and we don't necessarily know who they are. And so the first step is we got to know who we are to even determine if we're having intrusive thoughts, right?
Mm,
Many of our ancestors didn't have the opportunity that we have today in this day and time where we're being introduced to atonism, to our true religious identity. They were just living the best way they knew how, right? They grew up Anglican or Presbyterian or Catholic or traditional African spirituality, whatever it was they were living. They did the best they could. We're blessed in this day and
mm,
time to have a bar session, to have a kanisa, or a church that is helping us to put a lot of things into sequence, whereby we have an understanding of what spirit or personality truly is, right? What soul or this aspect of the blood called the DNA, how does it actually work with us? So I know for me, I'm not uh, a person that, say for example, I don't drink coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, right? But my father's a coffee drinker, was a coffee drinker. He passed away in 2019. May he continue to rest in peace. But there'll be times where I can smell coffee, or I want to have coffee. Um, I know it's not me that wants the coffee because I don't drink coffee, right?
right, right, right.
And so that's I wouldn't call that necessarily intrusive, but it's something that I had to label. I had to say, okay, that's that. I know you like your coffee. You know what
Mm-hmm,
I mean?
mm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
However, as you maneuver in the world today, right? There are times when there are songs, and I'm sure this happened to everybody listening on this podcast today. The silliest, the most stupid. I remember when that Lil Wayne song, la 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 lollipop, the lollipop, la la, right? And I couldn't get this song.
Mm-hmm,
I'm not listening to the song, right? No one around me is appearing to listen to this, but this song wouldn't get out of
mm-hmm,
my head, right? It
mm,
literally it was usurping, it was taking over. It's like, no, we think of my lollipops right now, you know. And so so, so that's one example of an intrusive thought. We can get into
mm.
the reality behind it, but that's kind of an example of what an intrusive thought um would have been for me.
Look like.
You know, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to get into more of these examples. I want to ask you from your field of study because you spent time, if you don't mind just telling everyone what did school look like for you? What was your major? So that what I'm going to ask you makes a little more sense.
Sure, sure. So, high school, I graduated. Well, I went to school here in Nassau, Bahamas, up until 10th grade, and then I went off to boarding school, the Bowl School in Jacksonville, Florida. Um, Spent a year at University of the Bahamas, which was called College of the Bahamas at the time, and then I went off to Tuskegee University, where I majored in biology. I graduated with honors. After graduating from Tuskegee, I thought I was headed to medical school, but I ended up in this wonderful seminary of the Holy Coptic Church, and I got my degree in critical theology, and it's a degree that it's not a finite degree. You don't learn everything, and within those 5 years that I was really studying to just become a pastor before I even became a Calhoun. Um, you know, I, what I learned is that it's so much to learn. You understand?
Mm,
Even as a Calhoun or priest amongst those here in the Holy Coptic Church and here in the Bahamas, you learn that there's so much to learn, and so learning science and religion has been very exciting for me because I've always
mm-hmm,
had a love for
mm-hmm,
both. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
And so
Yes.
I know, yeah, in this conversation, both of those things are intricately connected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's a big thing for me too. You know, I love studying science, especially now
Mhm.
being a part of the Holy Coptic Church. It actually fosters that ability to learn science. Like in school, we're just have so many different misconceptions of education and of science,
Mhm.
and we don't think it's be relevant to our lives. But now I just dig deep into physics, into just different parts of science, into anatomy, into biology, all of these different things. So one of the
Yeah.
things I used to look at is like bonds, covalent bonds, all these different type of bonds. But I'm not
Right.
as, versed as you, right? So I'm going to
Right.
ask for your help because thoughts are influenced by people, places, and things, right? And so I
Yeah.
would think because people are not inanimate, because people can actually have connection, even though now today is different, we have connection with inanimate objects and things. But in the true
Mhm.
essence of people, how we should connect, it seems like the right people should serve as a way to keep individuals on purpose, right?
Mhm.
And I like that. We're gonna definitely hashtag keep me on purpose for righteous Jules. But
Yes.
it seems like it seems like that people should keep you on purpose if they're the right type of individuals. So if we create bonds with people, we create connections with people. In the last video, we spoke about like oxytocin, these different bonding hormones. If we connect and bond with people, one, I want to ask you not only how is it formed, but how are bonds broken? And it's a reason why I'm asking.
So when you're talking about bonds on the atomic level, these bonds are when they drawn in the textbook, it's a static image, but it's really a relationship that atoms have and how they share electrons in their outer shells.
Mm,
What makes them want to share the electrons is that one atom wants to get rid of a certain amount of electrons, and another atom wants to add on a certain amount of electrons. Those electrons ultimately form what we call bonds, right? You have different
mhm,
types of bonds, covalent bonds, ionic bonds, etc. And the bonds can be broken in different ways. So, for example, a piece of glass, right? If you have a glass bottle or a champagne cup, I know in some in our cultures when there's a wedding, you would break a piece of glass, just a light piece of glass, right? What's happening when that glass is being broken in that instance? The bond is being broken because as the pressure from the person's foot is placed on the glass, it causes the like charges, the positive charges, to align, and the negative charges to align, and then they begin to repel, which causes the glass to break. Right. So
Mm,
that's called
okay.
an ionic. That's an ionic bond. You can
Mhm.
also have in a covalent bond.
Mhm.
What happens is, and I see social media bringing up some images so we can have a better
Yes.
understanding or appreciation of it, right? But
Mhm.
ultimately, you can also add heat or energy to the
Mm.
bonds, right? So let's just think about a piece of chocolate, right? You want to melt this
Mhm.
chocolate. Tell I'm hungry, right? You want to melt this chocolate and
Me too. Me
put
too.
it over some ice cream, right? So
Mhm.
the way that's gonna happen quickly is you're gonna add heat to it, right? You can put it
Mhm.
in the oven, you can put it in a pan, or whatever. But when you add the heat, that's going to excite the electrons. It's going to cause friction, and that too can begin to break the bonds. Same thing happens with water. When
Okay.
you put water in a pot, the fire heats it up, and then it goes from a liquid into what you call steam or ultimately gas. And so that's how those
Mhm.
bonds
Mhm.
ultimately break once you add
Okay.
energy to it. Hmm.
Okay, so now you can help me, right? Because this is me call
Hmm.
myself analyzing something, trying to
Hmm.
put it together. And so
You're
you
doing a
can
good
help
job.
me in figuring this out, right? Because
Hmm.
that bond, though, that outer ring or that outer shell that they share consists of stable electrons, right?
Yes, I'm
Opposed
listening up.
to, so that's one thing I took into consideration is that this is stable electrons. Now, when a bond is broken, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but that force has to be greater than that which is has bonded those, created that bond. So when you spoke of the glass or the different examples you just gave, is it correct in saying that the force that breaks the bond must be stronger?
So it definitely must be stronger. Um, what happens? Ah,
We can still hear you, I believe. Okay, I believe Kahun Uncle dropped out, but he'll be back with us. And right now, we're questioning him from his field of study on bonds, on this force that breaks bonds. And it's the reason why we're asking these questions because as we're trying to understand thought, we want to see it from different perspectives. That's what the vantage point is about. The vantage point is not about what we have been taught and our ways of analyzing and perceiving things that have been taught to us, but to look at it from a different angle. So we try to make it relevant to everybody and relevant to how everybody processes information. So thank you for tuning into the Vantage Point. I see more people coming in. Let's see what the comments are saying. I need to see if we're getting any type of comments here today. Mastu loving this. Okay, peace and blessings, everyone joining us live. Chemical bonds, let's read a little bit more about it. So when he comes back in, we kind of already going to be up to speed. Chemical bonds and human emotions are deeply connected as a complex interplay of neurotransmitters and hormones within the brain creates and regulates our feelings. If we can keep that on the screen, if you go back to the previous video we just posted, we were talking about these neurotransmitters and hormones within the brain and how they regulate our feelings, right? We have neurotransmitters such as dopamine, such as serotonin. So, dopamine, which is kind of just great how it serves as a neurotransmitter, and a hormone works where it deals with your reward system. So this reward system of ours, as it pertains to these bonds, right? From the best way I can explain it at this time is that we may see a person, we may see a cake, right? A dessert, any dessert that you like. And because you have a want or desire for that person or for that thing, it creates or elevates the level of this neurotransmitter, right? Like dopamine. And because that level elevates, it kind of does it in anticipation for the reward of that thing. So, neurotransmitters deal with feelings and emotions because you have a feeling for that person that you're attracted to, that man or that woman who, looks good to you, who is that cake that's desirable to you. You see, I keep saying cake like I want some cake, cookies, whatever it is that you enjoy, right? And because of the desire for that thing, it already creates this reaction or chemical reaction in your body. I believe on the screen it also mentioned neurotransmitters and hormones. So you have hormones like oxytocin, which is a bonding hormone, and within any type of situation like arousal or orgasm, you have an influx, you have an increase in this oxytocin. And because of this increase, it helps you to pair and to bond with that individual or with, yeah, that individual. Hopefully, it's not individuals with an S. Nowadays, we got to be careful, right? So it creates this bond. And the reason why we were asking our guest about the bond today is because we used to be bonded to our families. We used to be bonded to our scripture. We used to be bonded to our way of life and to our culture. When I say culture, I don't mean the culture that we're talking about today, Black culture or hip hop culture, right? Because ultimately, as my teacher taught me, that's just slave culture. That's things that we have taken in from society and called culture. We're talking about indigenous culture, culture that precedes the European culture that we had prior to any invasions, and before any colonizations, any subjugations, indigenous culture. And that culture prescribed for us our thought, that culture prescribed for us our way of life, what we should do, how we should do it, and it prevented these invasive thoughts, right, so to speak. So, in saying that, we were bonded to our family, to husband, to wife, to children. And if that bond has been broken, or if that bond is so easily broken, we want to understand that force that is able, that force that's stronger, that's able to break the bond. Now, I'm going to wait for our guests to come back to help us see it a little clearer. But from what I've learned, ignorance is a strong force. And so, ignorance is strong enough to break our cultural unity, oneness with each other, right? Through deception, through wanting or believing something to be more desirable than what you were given, more desirable than what we should hold on and should hold true value to. So, these bonds, we want to understand. I like to look at science, I like to look at biology, I like to just look at exactly what is taking place, not just externally, but also what's taking place internally. Because we today spend so much time in trying to understand the outer world that we never understand the inner world. And these things must be in alignment with each other, or at least our perception must be in alignment as to what to do with each other. So on the screen, and I know that media knows I cannot see that. Okay. So we can make it bigger. I'm gonna try to work with it. All right. We have a chemical band becoming together in a social life, friendship, and family. So we have some arrows pointing up between friendship and family and becoming together in a social life. So there should be, I guess, some type of interconnectedness between our family, our friendship, and our social life. You can't have a social life that's telling you one thing and then have family and friendships that are telling you another. If your family has been founded upon, like for me myself, atonism, this way of life, and this way of life tells us exactly how to live, then that means my social life when I leave my home the people that I contact or that contact me, the people that are in my workspace, the people that are in my play space, right? They call it play space. I don't play too much, but in these different spaces should all be interconnected. There cannot be a divide in your family values and in your social values. That just, speaks for itself. I think our guest is back. So I'm hoping we can bring him on the screen and he can help us in understanding a little more. Namastu.
In the Mastu, so we had a intruding power outage.
That's okay.
And
That's okay.
yeah,
I
yeah.
tried to
So,
give I tried to give a little context to our question while you were gone. So hopefully you
mhm,
can help us. I'll kind of reiterate where we were going.
yeah, sure.
So you were last speaking about these different types of bonds, and I was asking you about if the force that breaks these bonds must be stronger than, I guess, what has already bound them together. If you can give us some insight.
Sure. So, when you get into higher levels of chemistry, you begin to actually measure the actual strength of the bonds, right? Um,
Okay.
I won't get into all that today, but ultimately, to answer your question, yes. This is the same
Okay.
logic that's used for when you're forging steel to create a sword. You want to put that sword through way more heat and way more pressure than it will ever encounter when it's in battle, right? Um, it's the same thing for anything that you mold or anything that you want to have strength in the temperature range that most people live in, right? So for example, when you have metal, um, even in the blistering sun, your car doesn't melt because your car is uh, created or molded in a space that's much hotter than the rays of the sun. So those bonds are much stronger than the energy that the sun is ultimately given off, or that the car is receiving from the sun. So definitely, the actual bonds have to be, or the pressure or the force that's going to break that bond has to be much stronger than the bond itself to break it.
Okay. Thank you. So
Mm,
theoretically, right, just
hmm.
using this as an analogy, if
Right.
we created, and this is what I was saying while you were gone, and this is kind of where the thought process was. I can be a little off, but this
Hmm.
is how I analyzed
Sure,
it.
sure, sure.
If we were bonded, and I was on the radio with you earlier, and we were talking about feminism, chauvinism, and
Right.
family values. So if we were bonded as a people to our family, and we were bonded as a people, mother, child, a husband, wife, child, and we
Hmm.
were
Hmm.
bonded together, then if something broke this bond, it had to be stronger. So, in just looking at this, is ignorance, would you say, would that be a strong enough force to break these bonds that should serve us as keeping us on purpose?
It
And,
definitely
and,
could be. Sorry, go ahead.
mhm. No, no, I was just adding in there. And because those bonds are stable, would you call ignorance instability? Does it add, that um unstableness, if that's the word, to the equation?
Sure it does. The
Okay.
question would then be what you're ignorant of, right?
Mm,
Depending on what level of ignorance a person is being plagued by would determine
mm,
how strong, that effect of the ignorance is. So, for example, if we're born just away from our parents, we never met them, we know we have parents, but think of the orphans today who, maybe
mhm.
they were found in a trash can, or someone brought them to a doorstep. They're not aware of who the parents are, but they know that they have parents. They know that there's somebody who actually came together, and the semen hit the ovum, and they were born. But ultimately,
Right.
they're on a search now to try to figure out, well, who exactly are these people, right? um, in our communities, the ignorance of who we are as a people, right? We're told that we're Bahamian, right? The devil hates families and will do everything to try to destroy them, right? We got to fight for our families, amen, right? This ignorance, right? When you're born in a society that doesn't want you to learn about your roots, right? They just tell you, oh, here you're a Bahamian, right? You're from the Bahamas. That's all you need to know. But if we dig a little further, my grandfather was able to dig a little further, and he realized, well, guess what? We're not just only Bahamians. We are also Yoruba, right? And he was able to begin to heal our memory by making sure that we're aware that, hey, you're Yoruba, so you need to go in that direction as far as this side of the family is concerned to understand a bit more about who you are, why you do what you do, why you have the cravings that you may have, etc., etc. This society is designed to disconnect us from memory. Is so when we talk about thought, right? I think it's if I'm not mistaken, I think it may be Psalms chapter 33, verse 11. Social media could bring it up. It talks about the counsel of the Most High being everlasting, and the thoughts are being they move through each generation, right? This idea of ignorance plaguing us has so much to do with the fact that we are not aware of what Creator is. We're not aware of, right? So the counsel of the Lord, it standeth forever. Ignorance is not something that we're supposed to actually indulge in, but somebody is making billions of dollars off of our ignorance, right?
Mm,
The thoughts is our each generation. We're supposed to be teaching the next generation, which is why the family is so important, about what we're supposed to ultimately be learning and what we're supposed to be living. It says, for the thoughts of his heart, all right, to all generations. So every generation is supposed to have an awareness. Every generation is supposed to be aware so that we all know what is expected of us. We all know
mm,
ultimately who we are, right? We all know who we're supposed to bond to and who we're not supposed to bond to. But when that's destroyed, when something intrudes, when something usurps, these thoughts that we're having is because over the years, our Basesh, our Rev Dr. AJ Varma, he talks about, and even Dr. Joy DeGruy, she talks about this post-traumatic slave syndrome. But our Basesh talks about these boarding schools that many of the Native Americans or the indigenous Arawaks, the indigenous Africans, we were placed in these boarding schools in order to disrupt the thoughts that was supposed to be handed down from generation to generation. Right? There's the cliche scene of Kunta Kinte being beat, because he
mhm.
he doesn't want to give
Yes.
up. You know, sometimes that thought is actually a whip. Sometimes that thought is something that's manifested to literally step in and break the bonds that ultimately
Mm,
keep us intact with who we are, right? Just because
mm,
like these thoughts are persons, places, and things. And so anytime someone is stepping in to usurp how you were originally created to think, now you understand what intrusive thoughts are all about. But we have to get back to
mm,
the reality of what we originally thought to be able to identify intrusive thoughts. Because this demon, this beast, this devil, what they've done is they've normalized their intrusive thoughts. The book of Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20, and I'll shut it down after this. It says, "Woe unto those who make light dark and dark light, etc., etc." Anybody
Yes.
who's taking the opposite of what it is and making it appear to be the opposite, or making it what it isn't. Woe unto those people. We're making light dark, and we're making dark light, and that's what this society is all about, and that's what breaks the
Mm,
bonds.
okay. How are thoughts then connected to feelings? I just want to talk about this because, we're dealing with so many feelings, and of course, they're hand in hand. The feelings can affect your thinking, and then again, your thinking can create these different feelings. So it can, going inward or outward, however way you want to look at it. Can you talk to
Mm,
us a little bit about thoughts and feelings and, using any real person, yourself, anybody you've had experience with as an example on to
mm,
make it, relevant for our viewers.
sure, sure. So the way the body works, right? Because one of the ways that they have intruded or brought this ignorance into the original way we thought is that they made us ignorant of our bodies. Okay, they made us ignorant of who and what we are. So we don't really understand. This is such a great question. How thoughts are even formed. So the brain has these neurons, right? Scientists will say, 100 billion. That's a round number, so we don't know. It's a lot, right? It's a lot of these neurons
Yes.
in the
Hmm.
brain, and your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth, your skin, they're all receptors for these neurons, right? So
Hmm.
the way the body works is the body is analyzing the environment that it's in, and then it's reconciling its biochemistry within or the feelings within to determine the feeling that is going to ultimately uh, be experienced. So, for example, you walk out into the living room in your house and you see a toy lizard on the floor. The body sees the lizard and it now has to interpret whether or not is this a real lizard or is this a toy lizard. Now, all this is happening in split seconds, right? You have a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex that is going to help you to make this decision, all right? You have a part of the brain that's called the limbic system that has the amygdala and hypothalamus, and that's going to determine the type of emotion that you're going to have towards this toy lizard. You have another part of the brain called the hippocampus, and it's going to pull some memories to determine, hey, have we seen this before? Right? So the hippocampus says, hey, yo, don't bug out, man. It's just a toy lizard, right? So once the hippocampus, once that file is pulled from the memory portion of the brain, the prefrontal cortex can say, oh, we don't have to run, or we don't have to jump, or we don't have to kill it, right? Because it's just a toy lizard. Thereby, the feeling of fear that we may have had if it was a real lizard or a snake or whatever it was, it's tempered now. The limbic system says, oh, it's just a toy. You may pick it up, put it in the toy bin, keep it moving. Right now, if it's a real snake, the body says, hey, we got to get out of here. We got to get this snake out of here, or we got to get out of here. Right? But all of this happens in a split second. So when you're talking about feelings now, the part of the brain that is responsible for how you feel, this limbic system, the emotional system, it has a part called the amygdala, right? And this amygdala, it doesn't really, when you talk about feeling, without the prefrontal cortex, without that part of the brain that makes decisions, it's just going to react. If we're not making a decision, it's going to do what's best in it's gonna do what's best for survival, for self-preservation, right? And so let's now look at how that ties into just how I feel in a particular circumstance, right?
Hmm.
A lot of times when people have feelings, is based on self-preservation. I feel
Mm,
the way that I feel because I know that this feeling is going to ultimately allow me to continue to live or continue to do what I like to do. So a lot of
mm,
people don't have spatial awareness. They don't have the
mm,
ability. They don't have they don't have the ability to understand the world does not revolve around you. And this obviously it comes with maturity, right? Children
mhm.
oftentimes, they want what they want when they want it. They cry
Right.
for it until they
Yes.
get it.
Mm,
If you don't develop and understand that the world is not revolve around your feelings, right? If the prefrontal cortex has not been developed so that you're actually
mhm,
able to make the types of decisions that don't allow your feelings to rule your decision making, then
mm,
you get into a space where you're now making decisions based on your feelings, and now the consequences of those decisions are going to determine what type of life you have. My grandmother would always say to us, in life
mm,
there are no rewards or punishments. You simply suffer or enjoy the consequences of your actions, right?
mm,
So
mm,
feeling, that part of the brain, the limbic system, if it's not connected or working with the prefrontal cortex to make the right decisions, if we don't have the proper memories from the hippocampus region, then our
mhm,
actions are going to cause us to have consequences that are going to make our lives either miserable or
mhm.
what we want.
So
Pray,
most
I pray
people
that's clear.
today, that's very clear. So most people today are making decisions based off of how they feel, but because they're not processing in the prefrontal cortex, they're unable
Mm-hmm.
to really use the reasoning and use the problem solving skills and use all of these things that are developed or that are able to be processed in that region for them to make the right decision. So we're just moving off of impulse, right? We're just moving off of impulse instead of really truly reasoning it out. I kind of wanted to
Correct.
introduce stress into that equation because stress, I want to just read this. Says stress makes people more susceptible to intrusive thoughts, both directly and by worsening related mental health conditions. The stress levels can disrupt the brain's ability to filter and control thoughts, allowing
Mm-hmm.
unwanted ones to surface more frequently and greater with greater intensity. And it also was kind of just stating how because stress inhibits the processing in that prefrontal cortex as well, right? So
Correct.
in these, how is stress, how should we look at stress and these feelings in this process of thinking that we're trying to, overcome in a sense?
Right. Well, the devil is shrewd. The devil is very shrewd. The devil controls the inanimate world. The world around us
Mm,
is the inanimate world. We are a people that we are spiritual. This body represents the spiritual realm, even though they've taught us that it's the physical realm, right? So what the devil or what the society or what the system has done is it creates an environment that constantly keeps us producing stress hormones, so adrenaline, cortisol, um, two of the main hormones associated with stress. If you are always on some deadline to, hand in some project for work, or you're stuck in traffic constantly, you don't have time to really sit down and eat, which is what most people are experiencing today, right? We're eating fast food. There's no real nutrition in the food. We're struggling to leave home at a certain time so we don't get stuck in traffic. This is all by design. All right. What this does now is it creates an environment where we no longer really slow down to learn about who we are and how we operate and how we function, right? So, what begins to happen in the book of Proverbs, chapter 14, verse 12, it talks about a way that seems right. There's a way that seems right, but even though this way seems right, it ultimately leads unto death. Now, why would something seem right? If you're stressed out and you're not able to make the right decisions, in most instances, our ability to have what we call self-preservation says, we'll just move with the crowd. Okay, just go in the direction that everybody else is going, because someone in here is thinking. Whoever started running in this direction, they must be the one that's thinking. I don't have time to think, but I'm going to just follow the crowd, right? And so what begins to happen is we have what's called influencers, right? These influencers also represent intrusive thoughts because they have the ability to gain the eyes, to gain the attraction of the society. And because their life seems to be like what everybody else wants their life to be or feel like, they are now the leader of the pack. They are now running in a direction that everybody wants to follow in. And so if this happens enough and enough people are doing it, then the book of Second Thessalonians chapter 2, it becomes fulfilled. A great falling away takes place, right? A great falling away means that there are so many people moving in a particular direction that to move against the grain, which is what the Messiah, Yahshua Koresh, which what he ultimately did, he as a revolutionary solar terrestrial force on Earth was moving counter to the herd mentality, right? The Pharisees, the scribes, the Sanhedrin, they represented the religious order that ultimately was keeping this herd mentality in place so that they could rule, right? But the reality is they must keep the thoughts playing. Today is through propaganda, right? They must continuously uh, play these thoughts through television, through radio, through media, through social
Mm,
media over and over and over again. Because if the lie is told enough, it
mm,
seems
you
to be the
believe it.
truth. And Proverbs
Mm-hmm.
14 and 12, becomes a reality, but it leads unto death.
Leads unto death. And I think that's what most people are experiencing, right? We spoke about this spiritual death before, but most
Yes.
certainly I see much instability. I don't know why I couldn't say that word earlier, much instability in people trying to figure out, like, why am I feeling these ways? Why is there so much conflict internally? And it's like I'm trying to like eliminate some of these thoughts. I have this feeling, that feeling, and I'm trying to figure out what's right. So we're going to talk a little bit more in detail from the examples I was asked to present from people that I know, things
Hmm.
that I was shared, viewers, and also then we'll get more into like culture, religion, things like that. But
Sure.
relationships is a big thing for most people. So, how does thoughts affect our desire or feelings affect our desire to want to copulate with the wrong people?
Yeah. Well, today, sex sells, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I want
Mm-hmm.
I worked for an ad agency for about 5 years, right? If you want this product to sell, you got to make it sexy. You understand what I'm saying? And
Yes.
that's not a good or a bad thing, but ultimately, how are you gonna make it sexy, right? If you're just gonna get a half naked person to stand next to the car just so people can stop long enough to figure out, "Hey," and then you get all these clicks, right? That
Yeah.
that's an instinctive response, right? To
Mm,
to to seeing somebody who shouldn't be naked actually standing
mhm,
next to a car, and maybe they aren't naked, but you stop long enough to get what the advertisers wanted you to do. They wanted you to stop. What's
mhm,
happening today, like we said earlier, is this normalization of the book of
mhm,
Revelation chapter 13. It talks about this image of the beast. This beast has an image, this beast
mhm,
has a likeness, but it's been normalized, right? So what happens is today there's a statement that says they don't really know how to define pornography, but if you see it, you know it. I remember
mm,
someone
mm,
mentioning that one time, right? Um,
mhm,
but everything today, if you really slow down and look at it, is like the radio is like porn. And I used to say soft porn. It's not even soft porn anymore. They've totally they don't know what a metaphor is. They don't know what a simile is. They don't use any literary devices. They just they
Mm,
explain two people getting together and having sex, and I'm like, that's a song, right? But
mm,
what does that do to the amygdala? The amygdala
mm,
doesn't understand that that's a song. The amygdala doesn't understand. Oh, that's a video. That's a an advertisement. That's a movie. That's not how the amygdala works. The amygdala says,
mm.
oh, it's time to get busy. You
Right.
understand? It's time. So the body starts to produce the hormones necessary for reproduction,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
But then if you aren't in a position to have natural sexual union, you have all of these hormones pumped into you. That what you
Mm-hmm.
gonna do with them? What are you gonna do with it now? You know,
Right,
it's there.
right. Right.
So it's not that those hormones are bad, but because they were triggered at an inappropriate time, they now become
Mm,
intrusive. So intrusive thoughts
right,
aren't
right.
always necessarily bad thoughts. They can be
Mm,
thoughts that have been triggered out of sequence or out of place
mm,
of when they're
right.
supposed to have been triggered. And this world, the book of Second Corinthians 4 verse 4, this Satan, who's the god of the world, understands that if he controls or she controls the inanimate world, they can cause our bodies to be stimulated in ways that can throw our thoughts out of sequence, and
Mm,
it causes our body chemistry to ultimately not function the way it's supposed to. And so once you have a imbalance within, now the
mm.
outside world becomes imbalanced.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
See that one? That was a good one. We're gonna have to we're gonna tie that back in. We're gonna tie that back in. That was nice.
Yes,
A
yes,
nice
yes, yes,
explanation
yes,
of it. Now, here
yes.
on the Vantage Point, we're gonna talk about things that most people won't. And so there's
Mm-hmm.
women, men alike that experience in intimacy where they may, because you spoke about the memory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have like just time with their spouse, with their woman or man, and they get the intrusive thought of an ex. So, what is happening there where an unwanted thought, because you don't care about that other person, you're not thinking about that person, they're not in your world, they're not in your life. So, why in that moment are they entering your mental space when you're having this intimate moment with someone else?
I think you're trying to confess. It's okay. You can confess. Don't
Oh, no,
you?
not me.
I, I could I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. That
These
was a
are
low
not my
hanging fruit.
confessions. This is not Usher.
uh, no, but real talk, right? Real talk, right? Um,
Mhm,
the way that the way the mind works, okay, the way
mhm,
hormones work, the way memories work, right?
mhm.
I'll even go a little bit further than the example that you gave, right? There are
Okay.
people
Mhm,
who, and this is hard to talk about sometimes, but there are people who've been molested, but
mm,
their body responded as if they liked it.
mm. Talk about that a little more, please.
So the way the body works is that when those neurons are touched, because um, neurons can be activated through pressure, right? So the way you're touching, you're being touched, it can be activated by a chemical change. It can be activated by an electrical charge, right? When you're being touched a certain way, the body doesn't necessarily understand who is touching it initially. Okay. The prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, the hippocampus, the various regions of the brain have to process this experience long enough to appreciate that that's not something that I wanted. Okay. Same thing can happen with a couple who is having an intimate relationship, have a natural sexual union, and they're reminded of an ex because of the way that they were touched. The body has stored that experience and linked it to that particular person. Doesn't mean you want to be with that person. It just means that you're creating a new memory now. All right. And the more new memories you create, the less you'll think about that ex or that experience that you've had before, whether it was a molestation or whether it was something that was pleasurable. But the way the mind, this body of ours, it is, for lack of a better word, an organic machine. Okay. And the more we learn about it, the more we can learn how to respond to those thoughts. If you make a big deal about the thought, now the thought becomes more a part of this new memory. Whereas if you have the thought and you brush it aside and you move on, now the thought is not necessarily a part of the new experience that you're having, whether it's a new relationship or a new experience or what have you. You understand? And so we, right? We have to understand the body and what this
Hmm.
body. The book of Second Corinthians chapter 4 verse 16. It talks about the body is wasting away,
Mm,
but within we're being renewed every day,
mm,
right?
mm,
And so the more we learn about this body and understand how thoughts actually work,
mhm,
our response. See, the trauma is not necessarily in what has happened to you. The trauma or the experience is not necessarily what is taking place, but how you have responded to it.
mm, mhm,
The
mhm,
response is going to
mhm,
ultimately determine, was this trauma, or hey, was this a fleeting thought? All right, I don't want you in my head. Get out.
mhm,
You
mhm,
understand? And we have to be the determining factor as to whether or not that particular thought, we're gonna make a big deal about it, or we're gonna
mhm.
just say, hey, it happened. Let's just move on.
Well, how important is it to have a conversations about those thoughts with your partner? Like, I'm not going to stay here too long, but I want to
No,
make
that's
sure
fine.
that we cover in understanding that if we're having thoughts, a few weeks ago we spoke about kind of having to suffer in silence. And I think because we try to deal with everything in our minds, and our minds are already chaotic. My teacher said before, he said, if
Right.
you got yourself to where you are now and you still listening to yourself, how does that work, right? So if you are unable to already problem solve, then how are you going to tell yourself what to do? What is the proper way of working through this? Then how important is conversation when having these thoughts? Because right now we're talking about intimately with a spouse, with a man, or just in any type of relationship. But what about,
Hmm.
we also deal with needing to speak about thoughts when it comes to other things, but we keep it inside. And so we deal with all this internal conflict. So how important, and I would say to tell the viewers, if you would encourage them, if they're having these thoughts, to have a conversation with their partner.
Depends on your partner. so, it's
See,
two
I thought I
things.
could count on you. I thought you was going to say yes immediately
Mm-mm,
tonight.
mm-mm. I'm not saying that.
He
It
said,
depends on
mm-mm.
depends on the part. So it's two things. Number
Mhm,
one, how often am I having these
mhm,
thoughts? Right? Did I have it and
mhm,
you know it didn't happen again? It's almost like let's say you were in the store, right? And somebody compliments you, right? You smile,
right.
you have a laugh, and you walk out of the store. You don't talk to the person, you don't get their number, you don't
Mhm,
even really know their name. They just was like, hey, beautiful,
mhm,
blah, 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 blah,
right.
right? Now,
Mhm,
if you go home and say, this man, he, was complimenting me and how beautiful I am, and you go home and make a big deal about it, then your partner's like, well,
mhm,
okay, you know him? Do you always see him at the store? Or now all these other
right.
questions start coming. It's the same thing with the thought,
Mhm,
right? Okay, you had the thought. How often do you have the
mhm,
thought? right? Are you
Mm-hmm.
is this
Mm-hmm.
intrusive thought always intruding? Because if it's always intruding, then we may have to think about why it's always intruding, right? If it's always intruding, then we may have a conversation because I want to understand why I'm always having this particular thought, right? And there
Right,
are
right,
triggers.
right.
There are triggers. The neurons
That part.
have,
Mm-hmm.
yes, the neurons, they hold memories,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is why we have what's called natural sexual union. Within natural sexual union, there are certain rituals that we're supposed to do that help us to. Remember, we were talking about the bonds earlier, right? The science
Yeah.
and the art of sex, right? Love lies
Mm-hmm.
liberation, right? If we aren't going to do the rituals that are going to break the bonds from the ex,
Mm-hmm.
then we're setting ourselves up for the intruding thoughts
Mm-hmm.
because
So
your
there's
your
actual
way of,
rituals, there's actual practices that are strong enough because we talked about that force. So these
yes,
practices are strong
yes.
enough to break. Wow. Okay. Tell us about it, please.
So you when you're dealing with the human body, you're dealing with
Mm-hmm.
the four elements. You're dealing with earth, wind, water, fire. You're dealing with
Mm-hmm.
the blood. You're dealing with the body. You're dealing with your breath. You're dealing with your
Mm-hmm.
blood pressure, and you're also dealing with this ability to tap into what's called the mind. Okay, the rituals that were created. We have to understand how blessed we are in this day and time. Each ritual has been designed to assist a trauma that we have gone through as a gene, not as an individual only, but as a gene. We've been through so many different types of trauma. Our great ancestors understood we have to have many rituals in order to assist our children, to assist our progeny, to assist our seed with healing. The ritual that's going to work for Kahun Anku may not work for Sister Azandi, and vice versa. You understand? And so the reality is we have to appreciate that a way of life is literally giving you a way out of having the experience of intrusive thoughts because you're now creating new memories and you're now creating new experiences. And these rituals are now breaking the bonds that these intrusive thoughts had over us. But if we ignore it, or if we don't think they are what they are and we don't actually perform them, then yeah, you're gonna be thinking about all kind of stuff you don't want to think about,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
So one last thing in
Hmm.
this, sector before we move on. You
Hmm.
have people, some people will say, well, my mom, my dad, they were out there, and I don't mean out there like out there, but what I mean is in the scriptures it says born not out of lust, but not out of love, but out of the will of man. So people
Right.
who were born in lust, right, people who were born in lust and trying to understand why they're having all of these thoughts, not understanding it's been seeded in them, how does that surface, if you don't mind? And it's kind of, you kind of shared a little bit, but for those people thinking exactly from that perspective, how does that surface when they're like, I had nothing to do with this experience?
Well, you even though you may not have had anything to do with the experience firsthand,
Hmm.
you are
Hmm.
part of that gene. You're a part of that lineage. So your
Hmm.
responsibility is not to try to go and undo what was done. Your
Hmm.
responsibility is to learn how to heal what was done to you,
Right,
right? So
right.
if we are not willing to embrace a way of life that allows for us to heal, then we're not going to heal. We're just going to put band-aids on these traumas, and they're going to keep being passed on to the next generation, the next generation, the next generation. What has to happen is, and what is happening in the Holy Coptic Church of the Black Messiah, is we have an opportunity to learn how to label these aspects of who we are. So if you understand that you may have been a product of rape, right? You may have been a product of a lustful interaction. You may have been a test tube baby, whatever the case is. The more you know about what happened to you, the better you can address healing the trauma, right? You can go to the priest and the priestesses, you can go to the bar session, you can explain these things so that it can be properly dealt with from a perspective of those who've been trained to deal with such matters. The problem is in our society today, we like to self medicate, right? We want to go on YouTube, we want to listen to our favorite person talk. Oh, yeah, that sounds good. I'll try that without understanding exactly how that ultimately is going to affect you, right? We want to try a new diet, but we don't know what our blood chemistry is. We want to try a new system of relationship because now everybody's trying to be polyamorous and
Hmm.
all
Right.
these different things, right? But
Hmm.
what traumas have you faced? So you what you end up doing is trauma bonding,
Mm.
and that trauma
Yes.
bonding over time becomes what they call it a powder keg of
Hmm.
emotions
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
eventually
Hmm.
explodes, and now we not even back to square one. We at square zero because like what happened? And what
Right.
happened is
Right.
we didn't get to know ourselves. We didn't get to understand and appreciate how intruding thoughts ultimately work. Right? The cronial response. Okay, I'm learning all kinds of stuff.
It's okay. It's an involuntary physical sensation
Hmm.
in the groin area, such as tingling or warmth, and can
Hmm.
be a distressing symptom for individuals with OCD, particularly in the context of unwanted, intrusive thoughts or sexual timid OCD.
There you go.
Okay. This is why this is the vantage point, okay?
Yes.
This is why this is the vantage point.
So we don't
So
have to
I
feel
want
guilty,
right, right.
right? We
Mm,
we we can
okay.
we can learn that this is a reality, and once you know the reality, you can now address it responsibly.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, so I want to move into the next part of this conversation. We haven't been taking commercials lately, but there are some things we'll inform the viewers of at the end. I think here, let me, before we move on, psychological warfare. For some, these responses feel like an attack on their sense of self. Leading to
Mm,
intense doubt about who they are. And that is
yeah.
psychological warfare. And so you
Yes.
start to doubt and start to go through these, like, w- thinking it's you. And
Right.
so that's
Right.
something to consider, which we have a
Right.
lot more coming up. So we definitely will recycle through this
Right.
portion and get more into it. Um,
Right.
I want to move to speaking about culture, right?
Hmm.
Society. I call it the non-culture culture because the Europeans didn't have a culture, and that's really what society is, made with this non-culture ethics and etc. So
Hmm.
this culture or what society promotes, from the myths to the fairy tales to the songs to the music, TV, everything.
Hmm.
These all influence our thoughts as we described. So I want, if you may, so that viewers who watch this, who this is their perception, can be forced to, I don't want to say forced, but they may be compelled to look at it from a different vantage point. What are
Right.
some of the primary things that you may see, notice, dealt with children, family, whatever, that they are holding firm to these perceptions, these intrusive thoughts that have now become their main perception of life, whether it be relationships, economics, labor, religion, anything that you
Hmm.
feel would be something that we need to address, that people can reconsider.
Wow, there's so many different
Give
aspects.
them
So let's just
all. I
start.
mean, not all, but you just
Yeah.
name them.
Let's start with identity first, right? The idea that we have to look like the dominant culture or whatever we see the standards of beauty. being placed in front of us on television, social media, magazines, etc. Right? Um, the leaders within the social media world have had to admit that the filters that they've placed on Instagram and other social media platforms have they've hurt the users because people see themselves as the actual filter as opposed to what they see in the mirror outside of social media, right? That's just an example, right? Then there's the whole way of how we're supposed to relate. Some people believe that to be in a relationship, you have to argue. You must argue. You must have, a steam it up session and then, a cool off session. Because that's what we see in the reality, quote unquote, reality shows. That's what we see on the Netflix and the Hulus, et cetera, et cetera. They encapsulate a relationship in half an hour or an hour, and we begin to take that half an hour or hour and place it into our reality and our day-to-day reality. And so sometimes things are happening and you're trying to figure out why is this person responding this way until you begin to understand we are what we eat. So if we're eating drama, if we're eating chaos, if we're eating literal drama, because we know, television is drama, but the drama within the drama, if that's what we're eating, then it begins to manifest in our everyday life. And if we don't understand that, then we begin to take that experience as our experience, right? It's just like when you watch certain types of movies or you have certain type of experiences within 24 to 72 hours, that's going to determine the type of dream you may have. So oftentimes we have these crazy dreams, and if we're not aware of what the dreams are, which is the body's way of kind of flushing out those unnecessary experiences or thoughts, then what happens is we begin to identify, well, the, the turtle was on the roof and it jumped on the rabbit. And then when I looked up, I saw my name in the obituary. Oh my gosh, I'm
Right.
gonna die. I'm gonna die.
Right.
Oh my god,
Right.
I got right. And it's like, no, you
Mm.
didn't you remember you was talking to your aunt about the obituary the other day, and you was in
Come
the
on.
park with your son, and you saw the turtle, and then the little boy had the rabbit on his backpack, and
Yes.
that's
Come on.
that's what you understand what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
so all of these, all of this ultimately boils down into what? Knowing thyself, right?
Mhm.
Managing thyself, learning to have a
Mhm.
conversation, the intra conversation with yourself,
Mhm.
so that you can then get to the point where you know how to have an interpersonal relationship. But we don't
Yes.
teach these etiquettes. And this beast, they don't care about etiquettes. They don't have etiquettes. That's like you said, they
No.
don't have culture, they don't have etiquettes, right?
Mm-mm.
But we now have to stop looking to this beast as the example. That's our
Mhm.
problem. We have examples. We have the Marcus Garveys. We have the Amy Jacques Garveys. We have the Francis Cress Welsons, right? We have our Barsesh. We have the
Yes.
Kawanat, the Minivazeres, the brothers and the sisters of the Holy Coptic Church. We should be striving to be the examples that people can look to in order to understand how to deal with what we're talking about today. Because if we're not embracing
Yes.
our true religious identity, then what do we expect the people who are watching us to do? They're not going to
Right.
embrace it if we're not embracing it. So all of this really boils down to understanding that image, Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 down through 28, this male and this female, they were created in the image and after the likeness of Elohim, of these male
Mhm.
and female gods, if you will. You understand? And if we
Yes.
understand what the likeness means that they literally had a way of thinking. They had a way of actually living that didn't allow for anything to intrude their way of life. So when something did intrude, they knew, hey, it's like somebody who never ate pork dreaming about eating hot dogs. You're like, whoa, what happened there? Right? That's
Right, right, right.
we don't eat pork dogs. You understand what I'm
Mm,
saying? So you know that's not your
mm,
thought. You can just rest that down
right,
right away. You
right.
understand? But
Mm,
if you're the person who just goes to the buffet and you just throw everything on the plate and you just eat, and just do
mm-hmm.
what you want, you don't know what's the intrusive thought.
Right,
And so
right.
we gotta simplify our life. We gotta simplify our
Yes.
way of life.
Yes. Just a couple more questions for you, please, Colin, if you don't
Sure,
mind, and we'll get out of
sure.
here because I know you're hungry like me. This Sabbath meal, this Shabbat meal is gonna be good, okay? I don't know what it's gonna
Yes.
be, but it's gonna be good. Um,
Yes.
so, um, okay, because we're saying how to overcome intrusive thoughts, we want to talk a little bit more about the overcoming aspects. One, well, let's first say, how do we create new thoughts? We covered in a previous video, many people may have not got a chance to look at it, but we talked a little bit about neuroplasticity and things like that. But thinking about yourself, specifically, because experience is the best teacher, how can you advise or tell us what you've done in your life? Because you know so much, but I know you've had to go through processes, stages of development, right? So, what
Yes,
have
sir.
you done to create new thought patterns?
Well, our Basesh, the Rev Dr. AJ Vama, he talks about the fact that you really can't change people, and that includes
Mm,
yourself, right? Without changing the environment that you're in. So the first thing you want to do, to create new thoughts, to create new habits, is to change the environment you're in. That's the inanimate environment, like your physical, quote unquote, physical environment, but also the environment within. So learning how to fast, learning how to take the proper laxatives, learning how to eat the proper foods. All of these things begin to change the way you think, the way you operate, the way you function in life. Right? If we're unaware of the realities of how, they in science they'll teach us, nurture versus nature, right? But the reality is, we learn in the Holy Coptic Church that our true religious identity, it talks about the nature of nature, nitir shel niteru, right? This reality means that we're not necessarily versing the environment, right? Nature versus nurture. We're going to work with the environment that we're taught to create through our way of life, right? So in our homes, right, Atonis Corinthians around the world, they have a space where they're going to light Shubat candles pretty soon, right? They have a space where you can see their ancestors, right? They have a space where, you know, incense are being lit, right? All of this allows for us to create an environment that the neurons, and these neurons are now interacting with this space, it can trigger certain genes within that says, oh, this seems familiar. I remember this. Hey, we did this 10,000 years ago. We did this 25,000 years ago when we ruled ourselves. You understand? And so once we can trigger
mm,
those genes that were present when we were ruling ourselves, we can then, once we can rule ourselves in this day and time. But it takes
mm,
us making sure that we're aware of the environments that they had 10,000 or 25,000 years ago.
right.
And the only way we can know that is if we have a guide. We have a guide, Abba
Yes,
says,
yes,
Rev Dr. AJ
yes, we
Obama.
do.
Yes. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. So I think it's the last question, but this is it. As we think about thoughts, one of the main things is now once we create these new thought patterns, once we read the right books, to give ourselves the knowledge and create that stability, because we talked about the instability that many people have because of all these thoughts and not having the proper sequence or place to put them.
Hmm.
Once we're able to create these new thought patterns, I want to talk a little bit about protecting thoughts. I'll do my best to word this question. I had this conversation a couple weeks ago, and this is how I see it, right? sometimes a little visual. And how I see it, I'm going to use my phone for a second
Sure.
because my family keeps trying to get me to get an iPhone. So I need to make use of my Android in a constructive way. I'm going to try to see if we can see it. One second. So I want to look at it like a thought. I'm going to use shapes symbolically to do my best to describe it or explain it, this question. So I look at thoughts as a circle, let's say, for example, and this circle, which is your thoughts, have to be protected. So they're in this packaging that looks like a square or rectangle. So the thoughts is the circle, and they're in a packaging that protects it, right? And then sometimes in our teachings, we always see a triangle. That's terrible, but the triangle is around both of these. But the triangle, I'm in my question of how I'm trying to get you to see it is this triangles is made of angles, right? We have these different angles. And so in thought, I think a lot of times we don't consider these different angles. We have one perspective. It's very linear. It's just one perspective of how things are, how they should be. It doesn't consider all of these aspects of life. And it wasn't until my Basesh, my teacher, it wasn't until this way of life, atonism, this true religious identity, taught me things that have to be considered. And so, in beginning to think analytically or to critically think, we have to start considering these different angles. So, you as being a pastor, you as being a kahun, you as being a doctor, I would like if you can tell us how or what some of these different angles that you had to consider, that you had to think of to develop your thoughts or develop your mental process, your mind on how to navigate these situations better, people, places, and things. I hope that makes sense. I really
So
do.
I just, yeah, it does. I just want to be clear because you
Mhm.
started out by talking about protecting the thoughts, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
then you went into these different angles, right? So
right.
what gives us the means to protect the thoughts is our way of life, our culture, our true religious identity. Our great BB, Dr. Marimba Ani, she talks about culture being the immune system. So, what is
Mhm,
an immune system? The immune system is represented by white blood cells of various types and other microorganisms that ultimately, what do? They recognize intruding uh, in the body. They would have intruding bacteria, intruding viruses, intruding um, particles that come into the body, right? When you have a way of life that teaches you to live in accordance with a way of life that's worked for billions of years, that's already taught us how to think and how to function and how to operate, what begins to happen is you start to become one with that way of thinking, right? This idea of at oneism, at one moment, at tonism, right? You begin to understand that your way of thinking is not your specific way of thinking. Okay. And if you understand that, and if you understand that you have great ancestors that are within you, waiting to be triggered by the environment that you consciously create around yourself. If you have a standard for the environment, and by the environment, I mean the type of music you listen to, the type of food you eat, the type of clothes you wear, all of this represents your environment. When you control the environment and when you protect the environment, you protect the thoughts. You protect how you perceive. You protect what stimulates you, how it stimulates you, and what ultimately that stimulation is going to trigger within you. So if you are very casual about your environment, hey, we're just gonna let any song play in the car. We're just gonna let anybody smoke around us. We're just gonna let anybody feed us whatever they feel like feeding us. Then your thoughts are going to ultimately be compromised because you're going
mhm,
to put things in the space. that don't need to be there. And now the
Right.
body has a difficult time trying to figure out what is needed versus what isn't needed. And this is why we say you got to simplify your life. You got this
Mm,
what the fasting aspect of atonism does for us. It simplifies to get to a point of what you call a zero time reference. And this zero time reference, or this base, this base perception, right? When you go to have a physical, right, they'll tell you you don't eat after a certain time. So when we test your blood, we can get a true evaluation of what your biochemistry is actually like without any food being introduced into the system, right?
okay.
That's a base evaluation. But we have to have a base standard, right? We have to understand that there are things that we're not going to accept, and there are things that we are going to accept. When you begin to do that, you're protecting those thoughts. Those angles that you were drawing,
Mm,
they
yes.
represent the degrees of perception or the degrees of the conditions that you are
Mm,
preparing around yourself, right? So for a child, for example, you're not going to show them 360 degrees of every situation. You may show them 15 degrees. You're going to show them enough so that they get an idea of what it is that you're talking about, so that you can then walk them through. And the next time they may get another 15 degrees. So now they're up to 30. As they grow and as they mature, then they begin to get up to 90 degrees. By the time as you grow in degrees and you learn how to perceive, you ultimately begin to have what's called a 360-degree view of the physical world. And then you can grow past that understanding of the physical world, and then you can do another 360 degrees of what's called the spiritual world. And when you master those degrees, now 720 degrees come into play. But you have to have a guide to say you only need 10 degrees right now. You only need 20 degrees right now. You only need 90 degrees right now, right? And that is going to assist in how you perceive. And ultimately, as you learn to perceive, uh, you learn to as our boss says, teaches us, what you're perceiving is really perceiving you, or what you're learning is really learning you. So the
mm,
information that we're being exposed to, right?
mm,
The experiences that we're having, they're really learning us.
mm,
And in learning us, we're going to get to a point where that which is learning us becomes one with us. And now you have
mm.
atonism or at oneism. Pray that's clear.
See, I knew you would bring the fire. I knew you would bring the heat and just give us some perspective. That's why we called you. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. I know you're hungry, so I'm gonna let you get out of here. And we will ask for you to come back another week, on another
Thank
topic.
you.
But you brought so much today. I couldn't have asked for more. I hope our viewers, you gained something from
Mm,
today. We here on the Vantage Point, we want to bring different ways for you to see the world, different ways for you to see your life. So we bring on these different speakers, scholars, philosophers, theologians, doctors, to help us in conveying this message. But this message is founded upon truth and upon reality. So sometimes we visit other channels and we may get the illusion, we may get the feel good. And here we want to make you feel good as well. But first, we have to insert reality, and then we feel better about who we are. We feel better about what we're able to achieve and what we're able to accomplish. So, here today, we learned a lot. I want you to think about a few things when you're having some intrusive thoughts. Think about what you learned today. Ask yourself, are these my feelings? Are these society feelings? Is this a hormonal reaction? Is this a moment? And after you ask yourself all of those questions, number one, subscribe to the channel, but also visit the house that I know best can nurture you. And that's the Holy Gupta Church of the Black Messiah, who creates the environment for you to grow, learn, and master self. So until next time, peace and love, and you have a blessed weekend.